Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Beacon in the Storm. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Jesse Willard, who is the chairman of the Decatur County Republican Party out of Georgia. Hey there, Jesse. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
It is a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas. How about yourself?
It has been a very humid and muggy day. We're getting ready for the tropical
Mm.
storm, hurricane coming this way. So it looks like in the next couple of days we'll be dealing with whatever comes our way. So
Hey, I just had to endure a Hurricane Hillary over here and I think my lawn chair blew over. That was the extent of it. First hurricane on the West Coast since I think 1939.
is, is the lake still filling up over there for you guys?
Yeah, it's been incredible. Lots of rain over here. It's gonna be an El Nino year, so we're looking at more rain in the winter as well. So I was worried I was gonna have to move, and no, it's just climbing. So good for us, right?
I love that desert climate.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a dry heat, as they say. I grew
Yeah,
up out west, so I love it. I've been out east. I lived in Ohio for 9 years. It's lake effect snow and humidity is just not pleasant.
I've experienced it once. We had a son that was in the Marine Corps. We went to 29 Palms, and when they told me I got off the plane, it was 121. I was, what's that going to feel like? And then when I got out, it felt like a microwave. So I understand.
That's
So
about it. Like if you stand in front of your oven, that's what it feels like.
that's exactly right.
All right. So,
So
Jesse, why don't we begin? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do and why you do it.
all righty. So Jesse Willard, again, at the moment, I'm kind of, not kind of, I am the chair for the Decatur County Republican Party here in Southwest Georgia. Anybody that know where that's at, it's Bainbridge, Georgia. So it's about 45 minutes north of Tallahassee, Florida. So in the state of Georgia, I'm probably one of the furthest south that can be in the state of Georgia and still be a Republican. So all around us in Florida, it's kind of a Democratic stronghold throughout. The last presidential election, we saw a lot of Biden Harris bumper stickers and placards and stuff like that. But anyway, make a long story short, what brought me to this point is 2 years ago, well, 20 elections, seeing how things, I didn't feel like things went right. And so I started calling all our elected officials and asking where they were at with election integrity. I wasn't really involved with the Republican Party at that time. I had always kind of voted Republican. Grew up, my parents were Democrats, so you know, when I got a little older, I started paying taxes. I started realizing that that wasn't really the direction I wanted to raise my family. And so, once we got married, my wife and I, Maria, we got married in '91. Kind of go back a little bit further. I have 5 kids and 10 grandkids, and so realizing after that 20 election that things kind of felt like they were stolen. Yeah, I guess I'm an election denier, but I realized that there had to be some kind of legacy we leave for our kids, and so either shut up or put up. It's kind of the way we raised our kids, and that's what we decided to do. And so once I reached out to all those election officials, some were Democrats, some were Republican. I found out how to get involved, and so I went to my first county convention, and I got elected the vice chair, and so got stuck in. Next thing I know, I go to the district, and when I go to the district, I end up getting vice chair for the southern region out of 30 counties in Georgia. So that was the first 2 years. Went through that. This last county convention, I ended up becoming the county chair, and then when I went to district, I became the first vice chair for the district. So it's been an interesting journey. To see the politics is a little disturbing, but knowing that we're doing the right thing and vetting the right candidates and making sure that people aren't just blindly checking things through and moving on. We're trying to make sure that holding people's feet to the fire and keep them accountable. So,
Wonderful. And serves you right for showing up to a meeting, right?
yeah, sir. I kind of expected it, but hey, I'm one of those type of people. I'm all in or all out, and so I'm all in on this. And so for now, until the Lord tells me something different, this is where I'm plugged in. So
Absolutely. Now, Jesse, you and I have spoken before, and you know the mission of my show, which is to help show men that they don't need to kill themselves by helping them learn about the wonder and glory of Jesus. And so I
Yep.
love to start the show with a simple question, but some people think it's complicated, but every guest I've had on so far thinks it's pretty simple. And so I'm going to ask you, just like I ask everybody else, what does
Okay.
it mean to be a man?
Um, that's an interesting thing. Being a man, the Bible tells us we're supposed to walk out our salvation with fear and trembling. So I don't think it's a formula that fits everyone a specific way. I was a children's pastor for a while, and to see what other people were doing with their ministries didn't necessarily always fit what we were doing or what God had for us. And so I think part of that is there has to be there's been a huge attack on the family, and so we haven't seen a plethora of fathers in most marriages. It's been, I mean, I can't remember the statistics, but when I was a children's pastor, most of the children I saw, they came from split homes. And so to be a stable man and to show love and compassion was something that most children sought after. And so it made it a part of our mission as being the children's pastors. Me and my wife worked together. She was our worship director while I was the one who came up with the object lessons and stuff like that. We worked together really good as a team. To have that stable environment for those children to thrive, I think that's what a man is. If I were to put encapsulate it, it would be to provide stability for that family or for your family or wherever God has you planted, so that people see that you're accountable, that you have integrity. Integrity is doing what in the dark when nobody else sees. And so having those qualities and those characteristics, and you can't, nobody's perfect by any means. One of my favorite verses that we talk about is from 1 Timothy 1:15, where Paul says, I'm a chieftain of all sinners. And so he came to a recollection knowing that he wasn't perfect, that he had flaws. And you see Paul's life, first time you see him introduce himself, he says, I'm one of the disciples, or I'm one of the apostles. And the next time he says, I'm one of the greatest. And the last time you see him, which is this verse, he says, I'm the chief of all sinners. So to have introspection and to be truly looking at yourself and evaluating yourself is something I think that it defines a man, so that he's not fooling himself. He's not putting on airs for other people, but he's living himself in a right standing relationship with God, and he's accountable for what it is that God's entrusted to him. So
Wonderful. All
that's
right.
in a nutshell.
To boil it down, he's accountable and kind of to turn the phrase of the name of my show, a beacon in the storm. He's there to protect everybody else, keep everybody on course. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Now you bring up the Bible and your youth minister, so it leads me right into my next question, which is, why is faith so important? Because my audience may not necessarily be people of faith. Some of them maybe, but I'm trying to reach people who aren't yet. Why is faith important? Why do we need it?
So, in my opinion, faith is extremely important. I grew up in a Christian family where we went to church. There's a period of time where we kind of got away from going to church. And so I've been through both parts of that. And even my own Christian life, I got saved at 15. After I got married, got to a point where I felt like, kind of sick of the church. And so I kind of walked away for a while. And God, if God has his mark on you, he'll let you run for so hard. I mean, it's a good analogy I used to use to the children was, it's like if you're bought by God and his seal's upon you, then it's almost like a dog on a chain. And I hate to mention it like that, but God will let you run for so far, and then he's going to say, that's enough. And then he'll snatch you back. And then the whole point is that to put you on your knees so that you turn your faith back to God. So the faith part of that, I think it's important because there's throughout the scriptures, there are, it's a model, it's a type and a cast for all the things that we're going to go through in our life. I said that I was a children's pastor. There was a point in my life where when I was studying voraciously, and one night I couldn't sleep, and so I decided that what I was going to do is going to go through Strong's. And as I went through Strong's, I started looking up every enemy of Israel. And as I wrote them down, I started realizing each name represented a certain type of thing in our lives, whether it be slavery, whether it be bondage, whether it be idolatry, whatever this. And so I came to the realization that if you look at Israel's enemies throughout the scripture and see how they dealt with them, God was showing you a direct answer for how you were to deal with those things in your own life. And so I think, and I know, one of the things I'd always pray for in my life, my dad was always there. My dad's 20 years older than I am, and he has Alzheimer's. So it's kind of hard to, we don't have those conversations like we used to, but he was a God-fearing man, and he was a good role model for us. And until, he comes to that point where he's just becoming the shell of what he once was. But, by having him, he wasn't really necessarily he was my hero in the fact that he was a good man, and he provided and he did all the things that I mentioned before, what a man does. But I was always looking for someone to be like a mentor. And so every time I would get close to somebody in that kind of capacity, it was almost like God said, nope, that's not what you're supposed to do. And so one of the scriptures I came in was that God is father to the fatherless. Not that my father wasn't there, but the opportunity I was looking for a mentor. And so when you learn at the hand of God all the things that the Father would teach you, you see things, and it's by trial. You go through the trial and the error of those things, and then you truly learn those things, because you're not relying on someone to tell you this is what's going to happen. You're going through it, and you're seeing how those scriptures line up to what it is you're going through. And so then it becomes even more cemented into what your ethos and how you see. When we spoke before, we talked about things that when we were younger, we had certain ideas that we had that now we get a little bit older, and our faith has become a little more fine-tuned. It doesn't necessarily ring true as we once saw it. It becomes a little bit more focused on how we apply that. Everything in the scriptures applicable. It's just whether or not it's the time. So maybe that's the way I answer that question. But
all right, no, that's good. I love it. And while you were speaking, it reminded me of the parable of the prodigal son. You can go off and you can step away from the father, but he'll always welcome you back. And
exactly.
so even though he's got you on a chain, he's gonna be like, he'll still welcome you back as soon as you decide to listen to him.
The Looney Tunes, when you see the dog running, or Tom and Jerry see him running as fast as he can to get away, all of a sudden it snatch you back, and so you realize, well, but the point of it being that if you're blood bought and God has a seal on your life, then and you truly have known Him, it says it's better to never known Him than to known Him and walked away. And so, not that you're apostate, or where you walked away from God, but where you've actually got to the point where you realize that there's a lot more here, that you may have been hurt by people or the church or whatever, but it's never been God. And so in our own life, we've seen it. We were children's pastors for a time, and then we were missionaries. We lived in Guatemala for about 6 or 7 months, and came back and completely had to start over who we were and what we were going through. And so hurts are part of that, and then how you heal through those things and your faith. I'm not necessarily plugged into a local church now, but I could say that my faith in God is so much stronger now because I've had to live out those things without someone, walking me through it. So, anyway.
No, it's beautiful. I love it. Now let's talk directly to my audience if we can.
Yep.
Maybe someone's out there, they're struggling. Maybe they're having those challenges and trials, and I know the answer is Jesus. They need Jesus in their life. How can we help them? You and I. How can the show? How can we as a country help these men find Jesus and come to know Him?
That's a really good question. In my life, I found that I'm usually surrounded by people who are not like myself, and so I find myself. My best friend in the world is a pagan, and so we've had conversations where it could be confrontational. It could be a conflict. It could be a situation where we don't see eye to eye. but the fact that we have respect and love for each other means that we can hear each other as we are without um, degrading each other and berating each other, and really hearing each other what we're saying, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what I would say, the biggest thing is community. And in that, what when I was children's pastor, and even now, I can point to, there's 5 or 6 guys that I know that I could call today, and they would drop everything and they would come. It would be a question. All I have to say is, I need you here. They'd be here. That is a huge thing is where it comes to men, because men, for some reason, they always want to be like a John Wayne or something, and I want to go out there and do it all by myself, and that's not always the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be, the Bible, Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And so we are supposed to be sharpening, and with that sharpening there's burrs, and there's friction, and there's heat, and all these different things that almost like a refiner's fire, to where what's happening is all those impurities are coming out, and especially when you're holding each other accountable. It's one of the biggest things I found, is that being open to other men or other people to confess those things, and not necessarily, back up the dump truck and just dump it on them, but to really, hey, this is what I'm going through, an accountability group, and those types of things like that, to where, because it's hard enough to be a man, a Christian man, in this day and age, where everything seems to be just pointed against it, and to tear it down, to rip it apart, and to dissect it, and then to call it wrong and say it's toxic masculinity or anything like that. I live in a region where I see a lot of young men who live with their parents up into their 30s, and they have a full-grown beard. And I found myself the other day thinking, is the point of that is because they've seen enough war movies where these special operators and stuff like that walk around with these beards, and they think that they actually attain some of that, but they seem like man children who are just living and not really living their life, but they're closed at home. So it's kind of discouraging to see some people and some young men not really grab a hold of what their purpose is. One of the things we did too is, when we were doing children's ministry, we would do a lot of outreach, and a lot of migrant workers and stuff like that would be in the areas. We would go out on Friday nights into the projects, and I'd buy 100 loaves of bread. My wife always said the Sunbeam was the best bread, so we'd buy 100 loaves of Sunbeam bread, and we'd go out and knock on doors. And our 5 kids and some other people in our church would go, and I can remember seeing a lot of times migrant workers and stuff like, we'd be stuck in their rooms playing video games or doing whatever else they were doing, and they were just existing. And that's, to me, one of the most depressing things in the world, is if you're just existing in the world, you're not really living your life. One of the things me and my wife really want to do is, we want to live our life to the fullest, and make sure that, when it's our time to go, that we drank every bit of life that we can, and haven't left anything. And be like Paul said, I finished the race, I've done what I'm supposed to do, and not leave anything on the table. So anyway.
All right. No, I've definitely seen that. And once we're done, I want remind me to talk to you about that point you just made about that. Okay. But you mentioned community, and I'm full agreement with you, Jesse, because I don't know if you knew this, but a study showed that 40% of men feel that they're lonely. And I thought, I had to think about that. Like 40% of men, they can't all just be single guys. Some of those have to be married guys. And so, like, if we're not involved in a community, like if you feel that you don't have a friend in the world to talk to, and you're married, I think you have different issues, but like, we need to have that fellowship. We need to have other men that we can rely on, who understand our struggles. And thank you so much for hitting that point, because it's such an important point. If 40% of men feel that they're lonely, they need Jesus in their life. If for nothing else, if you don't have another human on the planet who can be there with you, at least he's there for you. He's there with you all the time.
Yes, he is. And that's a really good point. I find myself, a lot of times, my my children are older now, and so
Mhm.
some of my daughters are some of the things going. I despise TikTok. I'm sorry. I know it's a good, but one of those things
As
I
do
can't.
I. Don't worry.
So the thing is, I see so many people sit around just idle, and it just that's an interesting word to use, idle. But I see so many people just lethargic and just entertained by these, and so, but some of my girls, they've been getting onto these channels, and they called me up the other day and said there was one, a lot of prophecy and stuff like that's coming out,
Mhm.
like on these things. And so some of you kind of like, all right, and they're asking questions. Our children have been raised in the church, and they understand who God is. And they all have good relationships with God, and they're
Mhm.
developing their relationships. But when they ask these questions like this, and they're going, should I be worried about this? And I'm like, wait a second now. And then you go back and look over what they're talking about, and you have to weigh it about what Scripture is. I think it was in Peter where he said something about you test every spirit and you ask, is this of God? And does Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh?
Mhm.
And if that spirit doesn't say yes, then you have to say that's not subject to, that's not God. Um, so one of the things they were doing is they were asking these questions, and they were fearful because they're like, "There's
Mhm.
going to be," and they're just whatever. This one example of the day was, "There's going to be 3 days of darkness, and there's rules." And I was like, "What? What are you reading? What are you watching? Because what rules? Who makes these rules up? That sounds confusing." And I kept telling my girls, I said, "Look, who's the author of confusion? It's not God. So where do you think this is coming from?" And so it's given us a good opportunity for us to have some of these conversations. But we're really close in the fact that they're thinking about, are these the end times? Are these, should I be concerned? And I said, the fact that you're even thinking about these things is good for me, to knowing that you're not just like, I don't care, it's going to be whatever it is, and we'll just move on. But they have children of their own, and they're wanting to make sure they're raising them in a godly house.
Mhm.
Maybe they're not going to church like they should, or they feel like they should be doing, but they're at least being mindful of the fact that their children need to have a relationship with God and that community, and so they're doing that. And anyway, did I answer that question?
I don't think I asked a question, but I appreciate it.
What
um,
was the question?
the original question was, how do we get men to know Jesus better? And then we were just
Yeah,
chatting there for a second. It's all good.
no,
We want to talk politics for a second.
sure.
So I've been involved in both sides. I've seen the Republicans and the Democrats, and let's just say it should be no wonder that I'm talking to the Republicans now. So I'd like to ask you, Jesse, why are Republican policies, conservative policies, and values so much better than liberal ideas?
Okay. So I agree. I'm having my own. Here in Georgia, we're having our own issues with, um, just politics.
Mhm.
Recently, President Trump had to go to Fulton County and turn himself in, has his mugshot famously put out and stuff like that. So it's kind of put a real interesting air here in Georgia where people are discussing this a lot more. So it's given us an opportunity for us to converse with people that normally wouldn't have these conversations with us about conservatism.
Yeah.
One thing we have in Decatur County is we have shirts on the back that has a list of morals, not necessarily, it's a checklist. Do you believe in this, and do you believe in that? And it's not check yes or no. It's just a question for people to have those questions. And so, whether do you believe in less government, and do you believe in free speech? I mean, just all the different things that we're talking about. And so that opens up a conversation for us to have with people who normally wouldn't be having a conversation with a Republican. They would be, and so this has opened up a huge place for us as far as being able to have these conversations. Conservative views versus liberal, one thing I was talking about a while ago is that here we're talking about toxic masculinity. So
Mhm.
if a man takes his grandkids outside, and he's I live by a lake, and so if I teach them how to fish and hunt and all those things like that, some people could say they call PETA up and they want to know why I'm abusing my grandchildren by subjecting them to these things that are barbaric and unheard of. I'm like, these are called survival skills. I mean, these are things that when I was growing up, my grandfathers taught me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm passing it on to my grandkids. And so I feel like the conservative views line up better with how men, especially Christian men, should be living. Now, there are some things that I will say that probably are better, as not unfettered charity or what's the word I want to use? Welfare. I think that there's sometimes people are down and out on their luck, and they might need help, a hand up, but not in our hand out.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point is to bring people. Again, we live here near Tallahassee, and one of the things I see is a Democrat-ran city, but the homeless population
out of control,
horrible. And this is a Democratic city, and they're not doing anything. I could say that some of them are mentally handicapped or mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people that need to be in an institution to be not handled, but to be nurtured and to be worked with to make sure that they can live their life in some kind of dignity. And because where they're living now is it's behind a Sam's in a homeless camp. So these aren't things that and I haven't seen necessarily the conservatives have come up with great ideas for that either. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It's one of the things, I am a Republican, but one of the things I find is that there's certain times that do as I say, not as I do. And I'm not okay with that part of it. I think that we all need to be living a life of accountability. I guess we were speaking earlier. We just had an instance where our governor, and I'm not throwing the man under the bus. I voted for him both times. I held my nose the last time I voted for him, but he's not been accountable to the people who put him in office. And so that to me is a disgrace, and it's a cry for there needs to be a change. And so, but we see on the other side, and I hear this all the time, is that the Democrats are really good about making sausage. They do all the grinding in the back, and they bring it out front, and they don't bring it up in front of other people. They hold their nose and keep going. So it's a fine line between us having to, I think with conservatives, the reason why we have such a hard time with that is because we do have morals, we do have values, we do have ideals, and we're not willing to sacrifice those. Now, again, I had to hold my nose for the last time I voted for our governor because the opposite of that was Stacey Abrams, and I didn't agree with anything she was doing. And half the things that our governor was doing, I was okay with, but I did not like the fact that he was not accountable to the people. He didn't even show up for the state convention. So I wore a shirt that said most MIAs I support, but the GOP MIAs I don't. And I had their names on the back. And so a lot of people, oh, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, I'm not going to be scared of those things, and I'm not going to kowtow to those people. I'm going to say how I feel, because that's part of being what a man is. A man is to stand up and to live by their convictions, and not just say, well, it's okay. Let's not cause any waves. And I'm not down for that. So I'm about making waves, and let's hash some things out. Sometimes, I mean, my mom, dad, we had two brothers, and there'd be times when my mom would get a phone call, and she'd say, the person on the other line would say, "Your boys are out front killing each other," and she'd say, "Was one of them bleeding?" And she said, "No." "Is one of them dead?" "No." "Well, they'll sort it out." And so we learned to sort our things out, and so that's the way I think we need to do as people, and especially in the conservative movement, or just in the country. We need to quit being so scared of saying how we feel about things, and saying it's the politically correct thing to do. It's actually what we're supposed to do. So anyway.
Darn right, Jesse. I totally agree with you. All right, we're coming up on time. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share before we wrap this up?
No, I would say that if you don't know Jesus, I used to tell our children this. I said, you have to be introduced first. And I'd ask, kids I'd have, a lot of times they come up and they get saved every week because they weren't sure how this whole thing worked. And so one of the things we had to get to a point is we had to explain how this worked. And not necessarily it's a formula, but, we would say, is Jesus your friend? They all go, yes. And I said, well, all right, what's your best friend like to watch on TV? And they're look at me like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, do you have a best friend? They go, yeah. I said, well, do you know what their favorite movie is? And they would go, yeah, it's such and such. I said, well, that's the way you need to get to know Jesus. You just need to get to the point where you're talking to him on a daily basis. Tell him your concerns. He already knows them. He's the one who everything was formed through him. So the thing is, he understands what's going on in your life. But we don't treat Jesus as a wish list and start checking things off. That this is I need this and I need this and I need this. That we actually have a conversation. We have those things. Growing up as a Christian, one of the things I questioned a lot, and so I can remember going to when I came back to God. I go to all these Sunday school classes, and because I was reading so much, I had a lot of questions. And so we get to the end of a lesson, and they say, "Is it God dealing with you on anything?" And I'd say, "Yeah, God's dealing with me about this." And everybody look around and go, "Yeah, we don't talk about that kind of stuff." And I go, "Why not?" And so, God's sovereign. I'm like, God's not afraid of our questions. So God's big enough to where he doesn't mind us asking questions. Now, the question is, will we be able to deal with the answer? And so once we figure out and we truly want to know, God will answer questions. David would say, how dare you be a mountain? And then the next breath he'd go, I'm glad you're a mountain. Yeah. So, I would just encourage anyone listening is that God's big enough for whatever questions you have. But the question is, are you going to listen to when he gives you the answers? And then what are you going to do with that? Are you going to just continue to run? Or are you going to actually do something? And because each one of us have a purpose, and God did not, his it will not return to him void, but it will accomplish everything it's sent to do. And also says in the scripture that he will complete the work that he began in you until the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And the way it looks outside now, that might be a lot sooner than we thought. So, he's doing a work in each and every one of us, just whether or not we're going to actually follow through. And he's looking for willing and obedient vessels. And so, when we went to Guatemala, that was one of the things I felt like I had missed the mark because it didn't quite work out the way we wanted to. But when I got home, I realized that God was looking for obedience before he was anything. He knew that he could say, I need you to go. And I would say, all right, where are we going? And we went. So that's the thing is just be willing to be obedient and willing to listen and never know what God's going to do. He's got great and mighty things in store for each and every one of you. So,
amen. All right, Jesse, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how can they do that?
So the best way you can do that, my email address is jjw_III @msn.com. I am on Twitter or X. That's one of those things I usually.
Right. Just Twitter.
I'm a notorious memer, and so I love to stir the pot. So that probably is the best thing to do is just through my email address. So
beautiful. All right, Jesse Willard, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today. We genuinely, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, keep looking for the light in the tempest. God will show you the way.